All right, today we are stepping right into the blood-soaked Great Hall of Odysseus's palace. We're here to really dig into the downfall of his infamous suitors and figure out what exactly they did to deserve their fate.
So, you know the ending of the Odyssey? It's an absolute massacre. Over 100 suitors are killed. But here's the question. Were they all just one big guilty mob? Not at all. This wasn't just random mob justice. This was a reckoning, a very personal one, for specific individuals and their very specific crimes. So yeah, let's get into it.
First, we'll talk about the general price for insolence. Then we're going to open up the case files on our main culprits, Antinous, the prime mover, and Eurymachus, the silver-tongued snake. After that, we'll look at some of the more nuanced villains. And finally, we'll reach a verdict. Why did they all have to die?
All right, first up, a price for insolence. And let me tell you, these guys were way more than just bad house guests. For years, they basically turned Odysseus's home into their own personal party pad, which was a massive, massive violation of Greek custom.
I mean, you hear it right from Odysseus's son, Telemachus. He says they are eating me out of house and home. They were just draining the family's wealth, totally disrespecting his mother and him, and even plotting to kill him, all because they thought the king was never coming back. But you know, in a crowd of over 100 guys, there are always ringleaders, and a few of them really stood out for being especially cruel and arrogant. So let's open our first case file, Antinous, the prime mover. This guy, he's really public enemy number one. The most arrogant, the most violent of the bunch. He wasn't just hanging around for a free meal. Oh no, he was acting like he already owned the place. He was a genuine political threat, and he had his eyes on Odysseus's throne. Just listen to how he talks. When Odysseus shows up disguised as a beggar, Antinous says, "What god has inflicted this plague on us to spoil our dinner?" I mean, wow. His own words just drip with disdain. He's dismissive, he's cruel, and he has absolutely zero remorse. And believe me, as bad as his words are, his actions were even worse. Let's look at his rap sheet, because it is long. He openly, and I mean openly, plotted to ambush and kill Telemachus. He literally threw a stool at a defenseless beggar who was Odysseus in disguise, but he didn't know that. He threatened another beggar, Iris, with some truly horrific mutilation, basically just for fun. And to top it off, he had the nerve to blame Penelope for the whole situation. This guy consistently chose violence. He was, without a doubt, a direct threat to Odysseus's entire family and his legacy. That's why he was the very first to die, a direct shot from Odysseus's bow. And the way he dies is just chef's kiss, poetic justice. The scholar Peter Jones puts it perfectly, noting that his death is entirely appropriate as he dies in the act of abusing zinnia, or hospitality. Think about it. He's shot right through the throat while he's lifting a wine cup. It's this incredible symbol of the gluttony and disrespect that defined his entire existence. He dies, literally, in the middle of consuming the very wealth he was stealing. Okay, on to our next major player, case file Eurymachus. I like to call him the silver-tongued snake. Now, if Antinous was all about brute force, Eurymachus was the complete opposite. His weapon of choice? Lies and deceit. And this just shows you everything you need to know about the guy. Look at the difference between what he says and what he means. To Penelope's face, he's all smooth reassurances, right? Homer says, these encouraging words are on his lips, but what's really going on inside? But death for Telemachus was in his heart. He's a total two-faced snake, promising safety to a mother while actively planning to kill her son, a true master of treachery. His whole brand of evil was just slimy. He openly mocked a prophecy about the suitor's doom, which shows you how little he cared for the gods. And this is a great one. When he fails to string the bow, he's not upset about losing the marriage to Penelope. No, he's whining about his reputation, how bad it's going to make him look. And like Antinous, he also threw a stool at Odysseus, but of course, he missed. But his true colors really shine right at the end. After Odysseus reveals himself, he immediately blames the now-dead Antinous. It's all about lies, cowardice, and saving his own skin. Yeah, and scholar G.T. Papakinos points this out. This is his final, defining act of cowardice. The second Odysseus reveals who he is, Eurymachus points the finger at the guy who's already dead, trying to scapegoat his so-called friend. Can you get any more dishonorable? That single act, right there, sealed his fate. Okay, so Antinous and Eurymachus are pretty clear-cut bad guys, right? But it gets more complicated. Let's look at a couple of what you might call nuanced villains, Leodes and Amphinomus.
Their stories really muddy the waters of guilt and punishment. And their stories are really a study in contradiction. Take Leodes. He was a priest, and we're told he abhorred the suitors' recklessness. He didn't like what was going on. But what's his fatal flaw? He was still the very first one to try and string the bow to win Penelope. So he privately disapproves, but publicly he's right there with them. Then there's Amphinomus. He's described as a man of principle, maybe the most sympathetic suitor of them all. Odysseus even warns him to get out. But his fatal flaw? He just doesn't. He fails to act on the warning and leave the palace. His inaction is what dooms him.
Right, and as scholar Nancy Felsen points out, even Penelope liked this guy for his good sense. Odysseus himself saw his good nature and basically told him, dude, you should leave. But he couldn't bring himself to break away from the group, and he ends up getting killed by Telemachus. And his story really forces you to ask a tough question about justice, right? Is just being with a guilty group enough to make you guilty too?
So that brings us to the verdict. Why the total slaughter? Why wipe out every single one of them? The answer is really baked into a foundational concept of the ancient Greek world. And that concept is xenia. This was the sacred law of hospitality, and it was protected by Zeus himself. It wasn't just about being a polite guest. It was a sacred duty. The suitors didn't just overstay their welcome, they committed a profound sin. They completely flipped the host-guest relationship on its head. They devoured a man's household, abused his servants, and tried to destroy his family line. In the Greek mindset, this was a direct slap in the face to Zeus.
So here's how it all plays out, the path to retribution. First, you have the crime. Years of violating xenia, plotting murder, and disrespecting the gods. Then the catalyst. Odysseus comes home, tests them, and confirms, yep, they're all guilty. Then comes the judgment. With a green light from Athena and Zeus, Odysseus carries out his revenge. And finally, you get justice. Each death is a kind of poetic justice, tying back to what that specific person did wrong. So in the poem's logic, this isn't just murder. It's a divinely sanctioned reset button, a restoration of order. They had plenty of warnings, omens, prophecies, but they were just too arrogant to see what was coming. And Odysseus himself says it plain as day. These men fell victims to the will of the gods and their own infamy. He's saying, hey, it was a combination of divine will and their own terrible actions that led to this. The story itself gives a pretty clear verdict. But we can also step back for a second and look at this whole thing through a different lens.
Scholar Jonathan Burgess suggests we can view the slaughter through what he calls an external frame. Basically, step outside the moral rules of the story for a minute and look at it with modern eyes. And when you do that, the sheer brutality of it all can be pretty unsettling. I mean, a great hall literally piled high with over 100 dead bodies, that's a shocking image, no matter what they did.
And that really gets to the heart of why the Odyssey is still so powerful thousands of years later. It asks this incredible question. Was this divine justice, or was it, as one scholar calls it, an orgy of blood vengeance? The poem gives its own clear answer, but it leaves us to grapple with these huge ideas about justice, about the thin line between retribution and pure revenge, and, well, whether any crime can ever justify such a brutal, all-encompassing end. It's a lot to think about.